The first light of morning spilled across the prairie, painting the endless fields of tall grass with strokes of gold. Dew still clung to the fence posts, glimmering like tiny beads, and the distant call of a meadowlark broke the silence of dawn. The cowboy had risen early, as always. His boots crunched against the dry soil while he checked the chicken coop, the same ritual he had followed every morning since the war ended and left him with nothing but land, silence, and a heart that refused to heal. But that morning was different. The coop door creaked open, and instead of the usual clucking chaos, he froze at the sight before him. A young woman crouched in the straw, her dark hair tangled from the night winds, her dress torn at the hem. She clutched 3 eggs in her hands, wide-eyed like a deer cornered in the brush. For a second, time stopped, his weathered face staring at her soft, desperate one. He should have shouted, should have dragged her out by the wrist like any rancher would when catching a thief. Yet something in her trembling frame, in the way her eyes darted between fear and defiance, made his voice. "Come out steady and calm instead. You want to work?" he said, his drawl low and deliberate. "Or wear white beside me forever?" The words seemed to hang heavy in the air, carried by the prairie wind. She blinked at him, confused, clutching the eggs tighter against her chest. "What?" Her voice cracked. Unused to kindness or threats softened into choices. He tipped his hat back, revealing sharp blue eyes that had seen too many battles and too many empty years. "You heard me, darlin'. I can set you to work, honest work, or—" His gaze lingered on her as though measuring the weight of her soul. "You take a place beside me, not as a thief, but as my wife." Her breath came short and quick. She hadn't expected mercy. Not here in the wide-open land where law was often delivered from the barrel of a gun. She had expected anger, maybe even a beating. Yet this cowboy, with dust on his boots and loneliness etched in the lines of his face, was offering her something no one had ever dared before. A choice. The prairie seemed to hush, waiting for her answer. A horse whinnied softly in the corral. The wind rustled the tall grass, but all she could hear was the pounding of her own heart. Her eyes flicked down at the eggs in her hands, fragile things, easy to break, much like the life she had been running from. She had stolen for survival, nothing more. But now survival meant something different, something far bigger than hunger. She looked back at him, lips trembling. The silence stretched between them, not as an enemy, but as a bridge. And for the first time since she could remember, she felt the weight of fate pressing down, whispering that this was not just about eggs or work or even marriage. This was about belonging. The sun climbed high above the prairie, beating down on the ranch with the kind of heat that left no room for weakness. She had chosen work that morning, if only because her heart wasn't ready to believe in forever. He had given her a bucket, pointed toward the well, and without another word, left her to the test. All day her hands burned and her back ached. She hauled water until her shoulders felt as though they would break, gathered wood until her palms, blistered and mended a torn section of fence beneath the watchful eyes of his cattle. Every task was heavy, every moment silent, but for the rhythm of her breath and the creak of leather when he passed by on horseback, checking her progress. Not once did he offer help. Not once did he mock her. But he was there, always there, his shadow cast across her whenever she faltered, his gaze steady as though measuring something deeper than strength. By midday, sweat dampened her torn dress, and her arms shook as she carried another pail of water. She wanted to quit, wanted to throw the bucket down and run, but the memory of his words, work or white, echoed in her mind. And for reasons she couldn't name, quitting felt like a greater shame than stealing ever had. When the long day finally gave way to evening, the prairie softened again, bathed in amber light. He found her near the barn, sitting on the ground, her apron smeared with dirt, The eggshell she had carried all day cracked to powder in her pocket. She looked up at him, eyes raw from exhaustion, but there was something else there now, too. Something she hadn't felt in years. A strange safety, like the earth beneath her had finally stopped shifting. He stepped closer, boots crunching against the dry soil. His shadow fell over her, tall and sure. "Well?" he asked, voice steady as the horizon. "Work or white?" Her lips parted, but no sound came at first. She had survived on scraps, on lies, on hiding in shadows. No man had ever asked her to stay, not as anything but a burden. Yet here he was, giving her a choice. Her hand trembled as she reached into her apron and pulled out the shattered eggshell, holding it in her palm like a confession. The fragile thing had not survived the day, just as her old life could not survive here. She closed her fist, crushed the shell into dust, and whispered, "White." The word was barely more than breath, but it carried all the weight of surrender. For a moment, he didn't smile. His eyes lingered on her, as if he were making certain this wasn't desperation speaking, but truth. Then slowly, he tipped his hat, a rare softness breaking across his weathered face. "Then white it is," he murmured. The prairie wind stirred around them, carrying the scent of firewood and cattle, of earth and life and promise. She felt it wrap around her like a blessing, and for the first time, she didn't feel like a thief or a stranger. She felt like she belonged, here, on this ranch, beside this man who had seen her not as what she was, but as what she could become. And as the sun sank low beyond the rolling hills, she knew she hadn't just chosen between work and marriage. She had chosen to be found.